Why, hello, and welcome to my very first board game review on my new YouTube channel, which is called Troglodyte World, wherein I mostly probably am going to review board games, particularly war games. So if you're a general, kind of nerd or game person, you're probably familiar with a good variety of board games that are about all kinds of things and can become quite complex depending on what they are. And they range from being very abstract to being very detailed in their presentation of a theme, more or less. And I think we'd all agree that these games are pretty neat. We like these games. They're fun to play. What's different about a war game? The game that is designed intentionally and with some attempt at rigor to model actual historical campaigns and battles that occurred in history as we understand them and to the best of the knowledge that we have, and usually to the bias of the designer. But these games were developed professionally, and still are, as a tool to try and learn things about what would be the best thing to do during a military campaign. But there are a lot of other reasons to like war games too, because you can just like the historical period, or you can just like interacting with our understanding of a thing. You can like pretending to be a general. You can like anything you want. They're just kind of fun to play if you're into that kind of thing. And they try to be very granular in terms of simulating their subject matter. So Fields of Fire is a war game that is attempting to simulate leading a rifle company in 20th century conflict. The Second World War, the Korean War, and the war in Vietnam. All of these from the American perspective. In fact, there are 2 volumes currently of Fields of Fire. Both of them are exclusively from the American perspective. There is one coming out that is, at some point, it is going to be from the British perspective. Fields of Fire initially came out in 2008, and at that time its presentation was like, the presentation was good, but the rule book was not clear for people trying to learn such a complicated and dense game, unfortunately. And from 2008 until now, we have had not really the best presentation of the rules. Some people will be very negative about them being incomprehensible or impenetrable, which I'm not going to deny. I started learning this game in 2011, and I've been playing it since then, and I would say that I've only actually learned all of the rules as of maybe 2022. And I would also say that I'm sure I still forget, or there are things that I'm like, oh, I didn't notice that. Which is part of the problem playing a solitaire game, is no one's there to be like, hey, you missed this, and you're like, oh, I did miss that. So how does Fields of Fire work? That's a really good question. And I haven't actually watched them, I bet there are a lot of videos that do a really good job at explaining that, and they probably do a better job than I could, and they've actually looked at the materials of the most recent edition. I have not so much, because I have played this game so much, to such an extent, I'm a little bit burnt out, and I'm not playing through Normandy again. For the war games, it is a game at the tactical scale, where the unit of maneuver, for the most part, is your squads, who have 3 steps, which will fall off and break into things. And you have HQ units that give them commands. And the way that it works, it's very abstract, in that the board is essentially just a grid of terrain types that you move through, with pretty simple rules, honestly, about how to move through them and what happens and that kind of thing. And one card, that terrain type, all the units in it will shoot at another terrain type, or another card specifically. And all of the fire is resolved that way. And it's resolved at the end of the turn. So you do all of your inputs, and then you update the game state. And then you're like, god damn it. And then you put in more inputs, and then you update the game state. And you keep doing that. And that's what the game is. But it's that across 100 pages of rules. Because what is depicted in the game and what is modeled in the game is not what's in so-called hex and counter war games, where you're counting hexes, where the hex is a certain amount of space and that kind of thing. And the turn is a certain amount of time, or it's all about intervals of things. That's not really how Fields of Fire works at all. Which also means that it's not really, even though it's at squad scale, as they call it, it's not actually really that tactical of a game, just because it is so abstract in terms of like movement through space and physical space and all that kind of thing. If you specifically like line of sight, and you like hexes, and you like all of the kind of spatial logic of that, you might not like Fields of Fire as much. It might not really scratch the itch for you. But if you're interested in playing a game that is explicitly and specifically designed to essentially be a solitaire board game simulator of just being a company commander during these conflicts, it models that. So what does that mean? That means that it models the communication systems between your various units It models the need for those units to actually be in contact with each other to do anything. What the units are doing, the shooting between the different cards and that kind of thing, that's fairly simple. What's robust and complicated is how you put your inputs into it, and then how and what you're able to do, what inputs essentially you have access to, what things you have access to interact with, which is limited by where your men are in space, the particular variety of communication system they're using, and how good of a commander you are, and if the commander's dead. Because if they're dead or otherwise taken out of the battle in a meaningful way, it just hits the fan. It just hits the fan is all I can say. It's like you have an organized thing that you're developing forward, and then you suddenly hit contact, and you can't predict what that's going to look like in any real sense. And then you're like, okay, here's the fallout of that. What am I going to do with this? And you go from there. With just cool stuff like the HQ units having different varieties of radios, including the World War II handheld radio that I can't remember the name of, but it was a big giant walkie-talkie that historian, or actually literature professor and World War II officer in Normandy, Paul Fussell, had described people just throwing them in ditches along the road in Normandy. You just see big piles of these radios just in ditches because they were completely useless for a lot of the application they were needed for. So Fields of Fire is a game wherein you have to manage the fact that your radios suck. Is that an advanced squad leader? I don't actually know. If it is, someone let me know. But that's an interesting game, and that's an interesting variety of granular detail, because it doesn't in any granular way model ballistics or any of that kind of stuff. It does model ammunition shortages and having to manage ammunition for specific weapon systems. But other than that, it doesn't really have any of that. It's essentially just fire. You get diminishing returns from firepower. What happens to units as they take fire is completely random. It can actually sometimes even be good. Unit can improve in its condition as it responds to fire, because you don't, as the commander, you don't know what's going on specifically in those situations, and you don't really know or control how the men who the units represent or comprise, how those men are responding to taking fire and running around and taking cover and doing all of the various things that they're doing. And it's just neat. It's just neat to play through. And I think that it is the greatest game ever designed by anyone ever, anywhere that I have played. Fields of Fire has some baggage, though, just because of the original presentation. A lot of people think of it as an impossible to learn game, or an incomplete or a sloppy game. It's not. I had perceived it that way when I first started to play it too, as being kind of incomplete and sloppy. It really isn't. That first edition just had a lot of errata, and it just could have been developed. It needed to be developed more, which is fine. It's not. It's you're limited in what you can do while you're developing a board game. It's important to note that the Deluxe edition, the new edition, has been extensively developed by Andrew Stead and Colin Parsons. They've extensively developed the game and have really just made it shine. They've really developed a presentation that appears, I haven't really looked at these materials because I've played the game to hell in the previous edition, but they've really developed something that, based on other people's feedback and based on just kind of looking over the materials, they've really developed something that is pretty. It lays out how intuitive the game actually is, despite how complicated it is, and it introduces it to you in just a pleasing, inviting way. That's just fun. It's a lot of fun, and I actually want to credit them for having this entire time up to it being published, making all of the materials essentially available. They remain available if you own previous editions. You can just online download the PDF versions of all of the new mission books and all the various things that you would need. All of that is available, which is just really cool. I really appreciate that. So should you play or get Fields of Fire? Well, that's a good question. If it sounds interesting, you should maybe get it. But let me try and explain it to you this way. I don't know if you've seen the film The Thin Red Line. If you've seen that film, you'll know that it is, in fact, or if you read the book particularly, you'll know that it is in fact about a rifle company during the Second World War, particularly a U.S. rifle company. And it's about their initial contact, their initial experience going into the war. The first mission that you play, if you start chronologically with the Normandy mission, is, I think it might be D-Day +2 or +1, I don't know, I forget. But It's right, it's like the first initial moving inland after D-Day. And the units that you're controlling, their initial movement into contact and their initial movement into being under fire. It happens in exactly the same way. You'll even have the goddamn battalion commander come and scream at you.
You commit everybody you have there and do it right now! Everybody! Your first platoon too, I see him lying down there and the fat ass is doing nothing. You get a man to him right now with orders to attack! And you move him by the flank to the ridge! Then you get that second platoon, you move him over to the hill! Have him press the center! Go straight up that goddamn hill! You attack them right now!
It's the only game I've played that can do that can actually represent that and depict that. Advanced Squad Leader, I don't think can do that. In Combat Commander, I don't think it can do that. I don't know that there are really any games I can think of that can actually do that I've played. It's just a brilliant game. It's perfect if you can stomach what it is. It's just a really heavy game that you're going to play by yourself for hundreds of hours. That doesn't sound cool to you. I don't know. I mean, do what you want. Maybe don't get it. I don't know. You might spend your money on something that sounds cool. Like, I've just said it was the greatest game of all time. Can you make any complaints about Fields of Fire? Oh yeah, there are plenty. I think that it's probably only a good game for the correct variety of player, and particularly a solitaire player, particularly someone who is not trying to exploit the game. I think that's important. My brain is bad at that kind of thinking. I'm going to be honest with you, so I haven't done that. I really suspect that you could actually break the hell out of this game if you wanted to do that. But if you did that, you would completely miss the point, which is playing it in the spirit in which it was designed to evoke this particular experience. And that is super cool. You just have to be willing to kind of indulge that rather than just being like, this is a game that this is a thing I'm interacting with and I'm trying to maximize something. The other issue is it kind of reminds me, I really actually want to compare it to a roguelike, a very traditional roguelike. They were extremely like old school 80s random shit, like tons of tables, tons of just any sort of weird shit can happen and all kinds of emergent stuff can happen. And the game can absolutely screw you and you have to accept that. But Fields of Fire is exactly like one of those games, exactly like a traditional classic roguelike, in just how brutal it is to the player, because it can absolutely screw you. You are moving around and you're encountering enemies at random. I think exclusively. The game is very random, which means what you're going to run into is going to vary a lot. And it also means that sometimes what you run into isn't historically what happened. But it doesn't really matter, because part of the point is that you're just developing a randomized emergent thing. It's supposed to be emergent. It's a very open-ended game system. It's a little bit sandbox-like. I suspect, though I don't know for sure, all of these missions across both volumes, the first volume and the second one, all of these missions and campaigns were developed or designed in order, in chronological order that they appear, I think, for the most part, other than Heartbreak Ridge. If someone knows, correct me if I'm wrong, because I could easily be wrong. But they appear to be a progression from that initial kind of, this is a randomized game generator or scenario generator for war, into like these are actual missions that are pretty clearly based on what an actual company was actually doing specifically. That kind of develops as the series goes along. And by Fields of Fire 2, it's pretty much developed into like, this is a set map, that kind of thing. The best game. It's so good. Like, it's so good. And there are a lot of people who like this game who agree with me. There will be anyone who's watching this who's is an established fan of this game is like, oh yeah, no, it's the greatest game. Like, you can't come up with a better game than this. You couldn't. It's impossible. I'm being a bit silly here. The way everything fits together makes perfect sense. What comes out of it makes perfect sense. It reads like, and this is actually one of the, I think the actual design intention of the entire game is that your missions will read like actual after-action reports from companies during the conflict that's being depicted. And that's just amazing. It's just an amazing game. I really recommend it, and I really recommend that you play it. If it sounds interesting to you. If it doesn't, then no, of course don't play it. Or maybe do, I don't know, don't buy it because it's expensive. The hell. So anyway, I really do appreciate your time if you stayed with me. I appreciate you listening to me rant because I really love this game. I really hope they do a deluxe edition of the second one because the second one is amazing. It's got amphibious assaults. It's got urban combat that I haven't played because I don't play Vietnam missions. That's just me personally. You can play whatever you like. It's like people will probably like this one more than this one. Like the second one. Like if it were presented the same way, you'd probably like the second one more. It's more complicated. It really is the shit. Oh, and I want to tell you about the Peleliu campaign because it's super cool. Because it's the first division, and I'm sorry that this is turning into a review of the second volume. It's not though, don't worry. But it's the Marine Division. I think it's the 5th Regiment, if I remember right, of the 1st Division, but that might not be correct. And it's based pretty clearly, almost not quite explicitly, but you can tell, on Eugene Sledge's memoir With the Old Breed, which is one of the greatest war memoirs ever written. And I didn't read the Okinawa Parsons because I had had enough after Peleliu. But good Lord, is that a good book. That is a good book. And Eugene Sledge was a human being who maintained his humanity despite the most wretched things that a human being could possibly experience. And it's a beautiful book. Anyway, but that you can pretty much play it out in the game, which I'm going to end this video. I hope that you have a good day. I thank you for listening. I'm going to go play a game.